Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and yes, this is The Roger Stone Show on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. My guest now is Colonel John Mills. Colonel Mills is a national security professional who has served his country with distinction in 5 eras: during the Cold War, during the so-called peace dividend, during the War on Terror, during the World in Chaos, and now, while we face the great power showdown and the fight to save our country. He is a former director of cybersecurity, policy, and strategy for the U.S. Defense Department. He is also a senior fellow now at the Center for Security Policy. When I want to know anything about international geopolitics, warfare, cyber terrorism, Colonel John Mills is where I go, and I'm very happy to welcome Colonel Mills to the Roger Stone Show this morning.
Roger, thank you. It's always an honor to be on the show with you. Thank you so much.
Colonel Mills, several weeks ago, one morning I woke up and I went to my cell phone and it didn't work. Now, I'm on AT&T. I didn't know until I could get online that there had been an outage specifically of AT&T cell phone service. Now, it came back after a couple of hours, but I learned immediately how completely reliant we are on these devices. I couldn't reach my children. I couldn't reach my wife. I couldn't reach my coworkers. This happens, once in a while when you misplace your phone. I'm sure everybody's had that experience, but the FBI director keeps saying that the Chinese have made deep inroads in terms of endangering our power grid, endangering, our internal infrastructure. I don't know whether he just said that because he wanted the foreign intelligence security apparatus, FISA, renewed, or whether that is a reality. So I guess that's a great place to start. Are we seriously in danger of a power grid shutdown? Could the Chinese really do that?
Well, thank you, Roger. One, yes, the 702 renewal, that was a little element of it. But 2 words, everyone needs to take away Volt Typhoon. That's the name of the Chinese cyber attack that's been going on since it was publicly announced in May of 2023. And the histrionics of Ray, of FBI Director Jen Easterly, of the new NSA/Cyber Command Director General Hawk, they have been over the top spasmodic about this, and they said flat out, this is preparation for war. It's called pre-placement of malware on all the different important things, such as the power grid, such as data centers. I just came out with 2 articles, one in Newsmax Platinum, one in Epic Times, about the data centers and their vulnerability. The Chinese are in a full-blown, full-throated sprint to pre-place malware. So when the shooting war begins, all they have to do is click the execute button and boom, our power grid is down. So this is a very real issue and matter. And yes, I would say 80% of their histrionics and testimony since December has been about Volt Typhoon.
I personally went out and bought a satellite phone. I'm just now learning to use it, but I was so upset when AT&T went down. I realized the possibilities. And I would urge others to consider that. I know many in the military rely on them. I know every U.S. senator, by the way, is assigned one. Every congressman, every member of Congress is assigned one. I think it's a pretty good idea. But are you confident that our government is taking steps to avoid this kind of attack or to repel this kind of attack?
Well, I think there are white hat professionals still inside the deep state, but they are. I would say there's probably more than we realize. I know there's more than we realize, but I think the challenge is you have a duplicitous Biden team that doesn't really know what truth is. They don't have a known moral starting point to gauge life from. So you have errant and ne'er-do-wells like Jake Sullivan as the national security advisor, who also ran the election interference operation in 2016, who's him and Tony Blinken, who ran the election interference operation with the 51 intel officer letter from the UPenn Biden Center, who goes to China and says, attempts to lecture and finger wag Xi, and all this does is embolden him because Blinken looks like a total fool in these negotiations. So they're duplicitous. They don't know what they want. I think they realize the situation is very real. But again, they've been inviting it. They've been walking around with a big sign taped to their forehead and their back that says, "Punch me here." And that's exactly what the Chinese have been doing.
Yeah, it is absolutely clear, as Ronald Reagan used to say, that weakness is provocative. Weakness invites aggression. And I think that is the lesson here. I had a guest on my podcast show this past week who made the point to me that you folks have to understand that the elevating and empowering Iran within the Middle Eastern region is seen in the Obama School of Foreign Policy as a way to stabilize the region so that Iran becomes a counterweight to Israel. And this is actually their vision. So in other words, when they gave what I think is now in excess, according to the Wall Street Journal, more than $126 billion, or unfroze $126 billion of assets for Iran. And the Iranians promised them initially, before they got the money, of course, that this would be used for humanitarian purposes only. And of course, after they got the money, they said, well, we can use this money for anything we want. And of course, they have. I suspect and believe, based on what I've read, they used it to restart their nuclear weapons development program. They used it to subsidize Hamas and Hezbollah, these Islamic terrorist groups. Colonel Mills, how close do you think the North Koreans are to having a viable nuclear weapon?
I think at this point in time, both them and Iran, we have to presume they have at least a rudimentary nuclear device. I mean, we've been saying Iran is 5 feet away from having a nuke for, holy smokes, I mean, since the Clinton days. Same with North Korea. I think we have to presume and err on the side of caution and presume they have some form of a rudimentary nuclear device, maybe in the range of 20 to 40 warheads, 20 to 50 warheads they can mount on missiles or drop from aircraft. Doesn't mean they're safe and reliable as ours. The old B-61 free fall device is pretty, even though it's ancient, it is engineered pretty, so it's safe and reliable. The safe and reliable is not normally in the description of what they build in North Korea and Iran, but I think you have to presume they have some limited nuclear capability. And the way Japan and South Korea have been working so closely together, which is beautiful, set aside their differences from the past, I think is also an indicator those countries think it's serious and they have real skin in the game. They are closest to the issue.
A couple weeks ago, we saw this media conflagration, certainly, because it was reported that Iran had launched a drone and missile attack on Israel. We were told the drones would get there first, to be followed by missiles. Everyone thought this was a World War III moment. People I know were glued to the television set. But then we learned a couple of disturbing things. First of all, the Iranians let the Egyptians know, who let us know, who presumably let Israel know, that this attack was coming in advance. That makes very little sense. And then secondarily, when you got down to the actual casualties, based on what I saw, one person died. So is this appears to be optics to me. These are optics, but for what purpose? Now, if my interpretation of that is wrong, Colonel, correct me, because you know far more about this than I do, but that's what this appeared to be about to me.
Yeah, hard to tell for sure in this situation. The reality is we have had standing contingency plans for missile defense of Israel to coordinate this effort going back almost 20 years, and it did include the partners of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt. It was a coordinated coalition effort. It worked, I think, pretty well. I think better than expected. Did the Iranians, was this all street theater? It's pretty hard to shoot 350 times at something and miss every time. I think very likely this, perhaps there was a little inkling of warning or heads up, but I think all things considered, the missile defense worked and worked significantly well, better than expected, probably gave the Chinese pause for concern. Again, was there some street theater involved in this? Oh, yeah, probably a little bit, but I think overall things worked. But one of the takeaways also, mathematically and economically, we blew $1 billion worth of ordnance, with almost essentially 100% perfect shoot down rate. But again, economically, we can't afford this trend line. We have to figure out a cheaper way to shoot down missiles. It was a historic international missile shootout on the night of the 13th and the morning of the 14th. A lot of takeaways from this. Very interesting. I think it worked better than expected. Now, something I caught, there was, I can't remember, I think it was Wall Street Journal said, according to administration sources, which is meaning Jake Sullivan talking on background, we were able to interdict even before launch. What is that? Interpreting that means we were able to reach out through cyber capabilities and really screw up the Iranian launch process, because a lot of it was liquid oxygen, extremely dangerous, a total mess to handle, and the wrong valve turns at the wrong time and everything goes boom on the launch pad.
Yeah, it was interesting. The coalition, I think, speaks a lot in terms of the overall picture. Many people have said that as Israel and the Saudis got closer together, they were actually, just before October 7th, on the cusp of signing a historic agreement, something that would foster peace in the region. The French and the British, as I recall, were also in there in terms of the Allied effort to shoot down these drones, these missiles. The Iron Dome seems to have held up pretty well, but you're right, it was extraordinarily expensive. It's extraordinarily vexing to me how Jake Sullivan, Special Counsel John Durham's report was up to his neck in the phony Russian collusion hoax. He is the guy who put out the false claim that there was a computer link between a Russian bank, Alpha Bank, and the Trump organization. There was a special computer terminal inside Trump Tower. That was a lie. Jake knew it was a lie. Hillary Clinton herself knew it was a lie. They both approved that line of attack on Donald Trump. And then, as you point out, Antony Blinken, who, by the way, is no better at playing the guitar and singing than he is at statecraft, because I watched him in a Kyiv bar, and Lee Atwater was much better. He was the organizer of the 51 current and former intelligence officers who co-signed a letter insisting that the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, as reported by the New York Post, had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Yet neither one of these individuals pays any price whatsoever for those political dirty tricks. For someone who went through a 2.5-year crucible only because I'm a friend of Donald Trump, not because I actually did anything wrong, because, as I think anyone who listens to this show knows, there was no Russian collusion. There was no WikiLeaks collaboration. There was no crime here. It's amazing these guys are still walking around. I just find it aggravating. Therefore, I had to bring it up. Turning to the Russian-Ukrainian situation, the House very recently voted, I'm sorry to say, another $62 billion for the war in Ukraine. This seems to be printing press money. In other words, when I ask, well, what budget item does that come out of? In other words, where is that in the planning for the government? Where is that money? And that money doesn't exist. They literally just print it up and sell it. Many legitimate stories about some of the funds that we are sending to Ukraine being skimmed by officials there in the government, particularly in the military. It's amazing when I tried to get the footage that I'm sure you saw of all those House members, Republicans and Democrats, on the House floor waving little Ukrainian flags, which I thought was insulting to the United States, embarrassing. I had a very hard time getting license to use any of that footage. The House members did not want that out. It's kind of amazing. But what I guess I really want to know, Colonel Mills, is what is the situation there? In other words, is sending the Ukrainians more money going to give them some kind of upper hand, or are we in a Mexican standoff where neither side really can win, other than chewing up lives and money?
Well, I think, thank you, Roger. I think, simply put, it is essentially a ground stalemate. The Russians are now showing progress in Kharkiv. But again, I don't know if it's decisive to create, to trap, go through Kharkiv, pivot south, and trap a lot of Ukrainian forces. I don't think this is maneuver warfare yet. This is still a war of attrition. Now, I've always been consistent on this. Always give Ukraine enough resources for essentially parity. I think we passed that point 18 months ago. I said there's a number of conditions beyond that. We haven't met a single one of them for any further aid. One of them, you got to make this a lend-lease program, not just throw money at them. It's at least you pay us back. Second thing is a dedicated inspector general, which you note in December, they appointed as inspector general, but I said a dedicated inspector general. It was the DOD inspector general, dual-hatted. You can't do that. It's a huge job. So a dedicated, but you did note that as soon as that happened, immediately Haiti collapsed again in insolvency. Why? Because that was the original money laundering from the operation from the 90s. And the international money launderers said, oh, they're onto us in Ukraine. We got to go back to Haiti. Now, the third is secure the southern border. Number one, and that actually should be the first one, secure the southern border. We just had a known terrorist, somebody on the terrorist watch list, break in no more than 15 minutes away from where we live into Quantico Marine Corps Base. This is the cult and the religion of open borders. And look they're breaking into Quantico, where FBI the academy is, where FBI special units are at, where the Marines are at. This is ridiculous. And again, a known terrorist tried to just drive through the front gate. How did it get here? Open southern borders. So the war is here, right here in our neighborhoods. But all these matters, again, we should be, the Russians are not the enemy. They are not our friends. They are a country with nuclear power. It was Madeleine Albright in the 90s who decided for some inexplicable reason to kick the Russians in the teeth and just hate on them when they were on the ground prostrate. And that ship has sailed. And unfortunately, the Russians and the Chinese now have an agreement to destroy the United States. So I'm a little more concerned with the new treaty led by China to topple the United States.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Colonel John Mills. He's the former Director of Cybersecurity, Policy, Strategy, and International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Defense, and we'll be right back.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. We're here with our guest, Colonel John Mills, a man who has served his country during war and peace. He is the former Director of Cybersecurity, Policy, Strategy, and International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Defense, and we are fortunate to have him join us today. Colonel Mills, when we were talking privately, you mentioned your concern about the Chinese and their activities in space. Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, thank you, Roger. I mean, space activities are within the U.S. government are normally held or what's a special access program, meaning you don't talk about it. But the Director of Intelligence for Space Force just came out with a briefing that gave a lot of details that they just don't normally talk about. For example, China's increased its on-orbit space capability by 550% since the end of 2015. That's a lot. A breathtaking number of dual-use satellites, the ability to image any location on Earth 15 to 17 times a day. That's essentially every hour of any spot on Earth they could get a picture of, which is pretty good targeting data. One thing that really I thought was concerning, 11,000 maneuver alerts a month. That means that's when Space Force detects somebody is moving or tweaking their satellite for absolute best position, for position navigation timing. Don't mean to be too technical. That's very important. Just a few years ago, they were seeing 6 to 7 movement alerts a month. Now 11,000. This means the Chinese are on a hyperspace blitz to get ready for war. And we're producing 6 space analysts a month. I mean, that's not even enough to account for those being forced out of the service because they didn't agree with the COVID vaccine. I mean, this is insanity. I mean, the Chinese are so far ahead of us, and we need a real change in the military. We need to de-woke the military, and this absolute dominance of space by China is just, that was supposed to be our ace in the hole.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
What would you say, how do you feel about the preparedness of our military today? In other words, if we, God forbid, should have war, which this administration is entirely capable of fostering a war in order to get reelected in a wag the dog situation. What do you see as the readiness of our military? Could we fight a one theater war, never mind a two theater war?
Well, in the early days of the Bush administration, we finally kind of gave up on the 2.5 war scenario and focused totally on the war on terror. I really should have said during the Obama days, finally that was 2.5 wars was dispensed with. I'm concerned about even focusing on the Western Pacific. I think the real metric and measurement is the absolute horrible recruiting and retention standards, except for the Marine Corps, but everybody else, including the Coast Guard, it's about what it was in 1974 when we went to the all-volunteer force, and 74 until the Reagan days were pretty dark days, and we're at it again. I mean, look, you can't argue with the numbers. Historic shortfalls in recruiting and retention. That does not bode well for the readiness of our military at all.
It is a vexing situation. I'm deeply concerned not only about the woke status of our military, but also the question of preparedness. On the other hand, in this day of high technology, a war with actual ground troops, I'm not even sure that could happen, given this enormous influx at our southern border. And experts I know tell me the 10 million number is low. They keep insisting that number is low. 10 million illegals having entered the country since Joe Biden became president. So here's, I guess, the $64 million question. Colonel Mills, what are the chances of a terrorist attack on American soil in the very near future? I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Well, I think extremely high. Again, we just had a known terrorist on the terrorist watch list try to drive into Quantico 15 minutes away from my house. I've gone through that gate many, many times. So they are actively, not just Chinese nationals, but terrorists are actively probing our bases. I mean, I would call that a terrorist attack. Ray is bouncing off the wall about a domestic terrorist attack, but I think it's also they're trying to play the boogeyman of right-wing extremists. Just a total false narrative there. But I think we're in a real situation. And look, with all the Chinese special operators, with the open southern border, I think it's a very real issue. And I think it's very high probability. And again, just a couple of days ago, a known terrorist trying to drive in through the front gate of Quantico Marine Corps Base, a sensitive location. I think that's right. That's where all the presidential helicopters are at. I forgot about that. So, I think it's a pretty big deal, and I think very likely.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank our very special guest, Colonel John Mills, for joining us today. And also want to remind you all to stay tuned, because before the end of the show, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to give you the special, much coveted recipe for Mrs. Stone's chocolate brownies. Thank you very much, Colonel Mills. This is the Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.